When I turned 62, I decided to let my son and his family move into the house I built with my late husband. They called it a family solution. I thought it meant warmth and togetherness. But last weekend, at their 10-year anniversary dinner, I stood outside my own front gate, uninvited. The security guard looked at me and said, "Sorry, ma'am, no extra guests allowed." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just smiled, walked away, and called my real estate agent. My name is Margaret. I'm 62, widowed, and I used to believe I had the kind of life many women my age would envy. After my husband passed away a decade ago, I used the life insurance money and our savings to buy a modest but beautiful 2-story home in the suburbs of Portland. It had a wraparound porch, a garden I tended with pride, and enough space for family holidays that always felt too short. When Daniel, my only son, got married to Jenna, I was more than supportive. I paid for half the wedding, gifted them a generous down payment for their condo, and when their first child, Emily, was born, I practically moved in to help. We were close, or so I thought. I was the one who sang lullabies when Jenna was exhausted, the one who stayed up with the baby when Daniel had to work overtime. 3 years ago, Daniel suggested something that seemed logical at the time: sell their condo and move into my house. He said it would bring the family together, save money, and give Emily a backyard to play in. I hesitated, but eventually said yes. I wanted to be part of Emily's everyday life, not just a visitor. To make things easier, Daniel offered to help manage household bills and paperwork. He suggested I sign a few documents to let him handle utilities and taxes. Just admin stuff, he said. I didn't think twice. I trusted him. I still do. At least the version of him I remember. For the first few months, things were lovely. Jenna began referring to me as our anchor, and Daniel would always say, "Mom, we couldn't do this without you." Emily adored me. She called me her best buddy. We would bake cookies together, play dress-up, and read under the big maple tree in the yard. I made breakfast every morning, packed lunch for Daniel, and even helped Jenna pick outfits when she returned to work. I felt needed. I felt home. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift. It started when Jenna decided to remodel the main bedroom. "We need a more modern master suite," she told me casually while sipping her oat milk latte. "It makes sense for Daniel and me to have the downstairs room. More privacy, and you'll love the attic. It has natural light." The attic? The space where we stored boxes and Christmas lights? Before I could respond, Daniel chimed in, "It's just temporary, Mom." I didn't argue. I just nodded and started moving my things. The mattress was thin, the stairs creaked, and there was no bathroom on that level. But I kept telling myself, this is family. This is what mothers do. A week later, I noticed the kitchen chalkboard had new rules. No cooking after 7 p.m. Please label your groceries. No scented candles in shared areas. The rules were Jenna's. She said Emily had developed sensitivities. I respected that, until one morning I woke up early to make pancakes like I always did. Jenna walked in, visibly annoyed. "Oh, I thought we agreed we'd alternate breakfast duties. It's just, Emily likes the protein shakes now." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. From that day forward, I stopped making breakfast. I spent more time in my attic room, listening to the muffled sounds of laughter downstairs. They started calling me Margaret more often, no longer Mom. Even Emily began to echo it. "Grandma Margaret," she said one day, correcting herself when she'd called me just Grandma. Jenna gave her a proud nod. It felt wrong, but I didn't want to be dramatic. One Thursday afternoon, I walked downstairs to grab a cup of tea and noticed high heels in the entryway. 6 pairs. Laughter echoed from the living room. I peeked in and saw women chatting, sipping wine, nibbling cheese. Jenna's friends. I stood there for a moment, unsure if I was welcome. Jenna caught my eye and waved briefly. "Oh, Margaret, I forgot to mention, I'm hosting book club today. Hope that's okay?" I smiled politely and turned back upstairs with my empty teacup. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept thinking, how do you become invisible in your own home? The week of Daniel and Jenna's 10th anniversary arrived with an energy that filled the house. Jenna moved like a woman directing a stage play. Florist appointments, catering confirmations, music playlists. Daniel played along, smiling at her enthusiasm. Emily practiced a short speech she'd written for her parents. It was sweet. Almost enough to distract me from the unease growing in my chest. One morning, while helping Emily with her school project, I gently mentioned that I'd like to invite an old friend, Martha, to the celebration. She helped raise Daniel, I said. She's practically family. Jenna didn't even look up from her phone. Oh, we actually have a strict guest list this year. Intimate. Just close friends and some colleagues. No extras, if you understand. I blinked. Martha was at Daniel's baptism. Jenna smiled, crisp and rehearsed. I'm sure she's lovely, but we don't want it to get crowded. You understand, right? I looked at Daniel, who was setting the table. He didn't meet my eyes, just quietly changed the subject. I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe they were trying to keep things small. Maybe Jenna was under pressure. I kept smiling, offering help where I could, fluffing the guest room pillows, polishing silverware, ironing Daniel's shirt. No one asked me to, but I did it anyway. That's what mothers do. That's what I always did. The night before the anniversary dinner, Jenna posted a story on Instagram, a photo of a long banquet table with elegant centerpieces and place cards. I counted 26 chairs. Intimate, she'd said. The next day, the house buzzed with final preparations. Emily wore a tulle dress, Daniel a navy suit. I dressed in my best as well. A lavender blouse I hadn't worn since my husband's funeral. A pearl necklace he gave me on our 30th anniversary. At 5:00 p.m., I stepped outside, intending to walk around and enter through the front, perhaps make an entrance like any other guest. But as I approached the gate, a uniformed man I'd never seen before held up his hand. "Sorry, ma'am," he said. "This is a private event." "I live here," I replied, confused. "My son, Daniel. It's his anniversary." He tapped on his tablet. "Name?" "Margaret Taylor." He looked at the screen, then back at me. "You're not on the list. I'm afraid I can't let you in." I stood there, stunned, as cars pulled up behind me. Laughter floated over the hedge. A woman stepped out of an SUV in a glittering dress and greeted the guard by name. He waved her in. "Ma'am, if you could please step aside." I took a deep breath. "Of course." I turned and walked away, each step heavier than the last. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I went to the diner 3 blocks down, ordered a cup of chamomile tea, and sat in the corner booth near the window. I watched as guests arrived at my house. I recognized none of them. After an hour, I opened my phone and scrolled through Jenna's Instagram. There they were, photos from the dinner, the long table, candlelight, Jenna clinking glasses with women I'd never seen, Daniel beaming, Emily holding up her speech. I kept scrolling until I stopped at one post, a caption that read, "Family means building your life with the people who matter most." Underneath, a comment caught my eye. "Where's your mom-in-law? Thought she lived with you guys." Jenna had replied, "Oh, just a quiet night for the inner circle." I locked my phone and stared out the window. That night, I didn't go home right away. I walked. I let the cold air clear my head. When I finally climbed the stairs to the attic, I didn't turn on the light. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened my drawer, and pulled out a leather-bound journal. It was my old expense ledger, from when Daniel was little, and I balanced every penny to keep our family afloat. Flipping through the pages, I found the record of the house purchase. Down payment from my savings. Mortgage paid off 2 years later under my name. I dug deeper, through a box of documents I kept tucked in the closet. Property deed, tax records, insurance, all with one name, Margaret Taylor. A cold realization crept over me. I never transferred the title. I never signed it away. All those times Jenna handed me forms to sign for convenience. All those moments Daniel said, "Don't worry, I'll handle the boring stuff." They were about control, not trust. They never owned this house. I did, and they forgot that. In the days following the anniversary dinner, I moved like a ghost through the house. No one brought it up, not Daniel, not Jenna. Emily, sweet child that she was, handed me a crayon drawing of the party with the words, "Happy 10 years, Mommy and Daddy," scrawled across the top. There was no version of me in the picture. At night, when the house quieted and the lights went out downstairs, I sat alone in the attic, the glow of my laptop the only light in the room. I didn't know exactly what I was searching for, only that I needed answers, validation. I typed into the search bar, "feeling invisible in your own home." That led me down a rabbit hole of forums, support groups, blogs. Eventually, I found a private group for older women navigating toxic family dynamics. I joined under a pseudonym and posted a short version of my story. Mother moves in with adult child, contributes financially, suddenly pushed aside. I didn't name names or details, just feelings. The responses flooded in. Dozens of women replied, "You're not alone." "Been there. Protect your rights." One comment stood out. "If the house is still in your name, they can't touch it. Consult someone you trust." I hadn't thought to check deeply. I had just assumed. The next day, I messaged a woman from the group who claimed to be a retired real estate attorney. She offered to review my paperwork, free of charge. We video chatted that afternoon, and I held up every document I had. "This deed," she said, adjusting her glasses, "is ironclad. You never signed over ownership. You granted management rights, temporary and revocable. Margaret, this house is legally yours." My heart pounded. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced. I made tea. I stared out the attic window at the darkened street. On a whim, I searched local real estate listings, and there it was. The photo was unmistakable. My front porch, my maple tree, my rose bushes, listed under a luxury realty group. Pending seller confirmation, it said. I clicked the agent's name, dug through the site. 3 weeks ago, Jenna had scheduled a private walkthrough. No mention of my name, just hers and Daniel's. There was even a downloadable PDF brochure with captions like, "Open concept kitchen with updated appliances." Appliances I had bought. Twist after twist unwound itself like a slow unraveling thread. I wanted to believe Daniel wasn't part of it, that maybe Jenna had acted alone. But something deep inside me had started to calcify. I had ignored too much, assumed too much, loved too much without looking. The following morning, while Daniel and Jenna were out running errands and Emily was at school, I crept downstairs and entered their bedroom. I had never done that before. It felt wrong, but I did it anyway. I opened Daniel's nightstand drawer and found his old phone, the one he said he'd stopped using. It still had charge. I unlocked it easily. His passcode was still Emily's birth date. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe nothing. But what I found shattered the last bits of me that believed my son still saw me as his mother. In a message thread with Jenna, dated 2 months earlier, he'd written, "Mom's still in denial. She thinks this is her house, but legally we'll get her out. Worst case, she's just a temporary occupant. We'll handle it quietly." Jenna's response was cold. "She's the permit we had to get to build our life. Once construction's done, the permit goes." I dropped the phone. Permit. That's all I was to them. A formality. A stepping stone. I opened a few more messages. One between Jenna and a friend mentioned how exhausting it was, keeping the old woman busy. Another hinted that Emily had asked to spend more time with me, and Jenna had said, "Not a good idea. Boundaries." I sat on their bed and stared at the ceiling. I could have screamed. I could have packed my things. I could have burned the house to the ground. But instead, I got up, quietly. I went back to the attic and sat at my desk. I opened a fresh page in my notebook and wrote at the top, "Plan, clean house." By Monday, I had already spoken with Ellen, my new attorney, the same woman who had reviewed my documents online. She was sharp, warm, and most importantly, outraged on my behalf. "They think you're a relic in your own home," she said. "Let's remind them whose name is on the door." We began the legal process quietly. Ellen arranged a fast-track listing through a private buyer she trusted, an older couple looking for a home closer to their grandchildren. The deal could close within 2 weeks. All I had to do was say the word. I said it. and then I made a plan. Exactly 1 week after Daniel and Jenna's anniversary dinner, I would host a gathering of my own, a thank you dinner, I called it. I crafted the invitations by hand, sliding each one under their bedroom door, tucking Emily's into her backpack. You're invited, it read, to an evening of gratitude and reflection, hosted by Margaret Taylor, Sunday at 6:00 p.m., formal attire requested. Jenna raised an eyebrow when she found hers. What's this? Just something small, I replied, to thank you for 10 years of being a family. She blinked, thrown off. Oh, that's unexpected, but sure, sounds lovely. Daniel said nothing, but I saw the flicker of curiosity behind his eyes. I spent the week preparing. I polished the silver, set the table with our old wedding china, folded linen napkins like I used to for holidays. I cooked everything myself: roast beef, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, lemon meringue pie. I poured myself into every detail. On Sunday afternoon, I lit candles and played soft jazz. Emily helped me place cards at each seat. Daniel, Jenna, Emily. One card remained unmarked. I placed it at the head of the table and left the chair behind it empty. At 6 sharp, they arrived, well-dressed, curious, smiling politely. Daniel kissed my cheek. Jenna complimented the table. Emily hugged me tight. You really went all out, Jenna said, sipping her wine. It's a special night, I replied. We began the meal. They talked about work, school, future vacations. I nodded, smiled, poured more gravy. When dessert was served, I stood and lifted my glass. I want to thank you all for coming tonight, I said. It's not every day a woman gets to express her gratitude properly. They raised their glasses. 10 years ago, you invited me into your lives in a new way, and for a while I believed I was part of something beautiful. I believed I was a mother, a helper, a blessing. Daniel shifted in his seat. Jenna looked down at her fork. But somewhere along the way, I continued, I became something else, an inconvenience, a background prop, the woman in the attic. No one spoke. So I decided it was time for a change. Jenna cleared her throat. Margaret, what are you? I smiled gently. Don't worry, dear. I'm not angry. I'm grateful. You taught me how to see clearly. I gestured toward the front door. A moment later, it opened. Ellen walked in, dressed in a smart navy suit, carrying a thin black folder. She nodded to me, then placed the folder in front of Daniel. What is this? He asked, flipping it open. A copy of the signed sale agreement, Ellen said. As of 9:00 a.m. this morning, this house legally belongs to the new owners. You'll have 30 days to vacate. The silence was electric. You sold the house? Jenna hissed. Without telling us? Daniel's face had gone pale. Mom, what are you doing? I looked at each of them. You threw a party last week and told me I wasn't welcome to invite my own friends. Tonight, I'm returning the courtesy. I invited the one guest who's always been honest with me, my lawyer. Jenna pushed back her chair, furious. You can't do this. I already did. Emily looked up at me, confused. Grandma, where will you go? I knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere mine. She nodded, and her eyes welled up. I stood and turned to Daniel. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. But sometimes, the only way to find peace is to clean house. And with that, I walked away from the table, the candles flickering behind me, the silence heavier than any words they might have said. The moment Ellen left the folder on the table, the silence snapped like a stretched rubber band. Daniel pushed back his chair, rising too quickly, knocking over his water glass. You can't be serious, he shouted. You sold the house, our house? I stayed seated, hands folded calmly in my lap. My house always has been. Jenna stood next, her eyes blazing. You didn't even discuss this with us. You blindsided your own family. I thought I was no longer considered part of this family, I replied. You made that quite clear last week. Daniel slammed his palm on the table. You're acting insane. You've lived here for years. Emily's grown up here. I looked toward Emily, whose eyes had welled with tears. She clutched the arms of her chair, confused and scared. "Why are you fighting?" she whimpered. "Why is Grandma selling the house?" I rose and walked to her, kneeling beside her tiny form. "Sweetheart," I whispered gently, "this house has been special for a long time. But it's not walls or furniture that make something home. It's love. And no matter where I live, you will always be my home." She threw her arms around me, sobbing into my neck. I held her tightly, feeling every ounce of pain I'd carried begin to shift, not disappear, but transform. Daniel's voice softened for a beat. "Mom, where are you even going?" I stood, brushed off my knees, and faced him. "About 2 blocks from here," I said. "There's a small apartment complex near the elementary school. I signed the lease last week. Top floor, big windows, quiet." Jenna narrowed her eyes. "You've been planning this." "Only since the night you didn't let me through my own front gate." Daniel's face contorted. Shame, anger, confusion, all fighting for space. "We thought we had time," he muttered. "We didn't mean to push you out. We were just handling things." "Like trying to sell a house that isn't yours?" Ellen said sharply. "You committed fraud, Daniel." His shoulders slumped. Jenna, ever the fighter, squared her stance. "We'll contest it. We'll sue. This can't be legal." Ellen pulled out another document. "Good luck. Everything was done by the book. And since you're neither co-owner nor tenant on paper, you don't even have standing." Jenna went white. She grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door. "This isn't over." Daniel called after her, but she didn't stop. The door slammed behind her. He sank into his chair, head in his hands. "I didn't want this," he said quietly. "I just wanted to fix things. Jenna, she said if we could sell, we'd pay off the debt. I've been drowning, Mom." I looked at him, for a moment, not as my son, but as a man, flawed, scared, and finally honest. "You could have asked," I said. "I didn't want you to know how bad it was. But you let me believe I didn't matter." He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry." I didn't respond. Some apologies come too late to matter. There was a knock at the door. Ellen answered it and welcomed in a smiling elderly couple, Bill and Nora, the new owners. They wore modest clothes and looked around the space with quiet reverence. "It's just like in the pictures," Nora said. "So warm." "This house has good bones," Bill added. "Feels lived in." "It's been lived in," I said gently, "by a lot of love and a few hard lessons." They nodded, grateful. I led them on a short tour, letting them see the backyard, the maple tree, the rose bushes I had once planted with my husband. When I returned, Daniel was standing at the foot of the stairs, holding one of Emily's stuffed animals. "What happens now?" "You have 30 days, I said simply. "Use them wisely." Emily hugged me again before Daniel took her hand and left. She looked back once, and I waved. No bitterness, no guilt, just a quiet kind of clarity. As the front door closed behind them, I exhaled, deep, free. This house had remembered who it belonged to, and so had I. My new apartment wasn't large. 2 bedrooms, a modest kitchen, and a tiny balcony that overlooked a patch of trees and a brick pathway where children rode their bikes in the afternoons. But it was mine. Mine in every way that mattered. The light came in just right at noon, casting warm streaks across the wooden floor. I filled the windowsills with herbs and succulents. A rocking chair sat by the window. Silence greeted me every morning, and peace tucked me in every night. I bought secondhand furniture and repurposed old dishes from a thrift store. Each item I chose myself. No compromises, no asking permission, no tiptoeing through my own space. And every Friday at 4:00 p.m., Emily would appear at the front door. She never rang the bell. She knew the sound of her knock would be enough. "Hi, Grandma," she'd whisper, as though the world didn't need to know. We baked cookies like we used to, watched old cartoons, painted rocks to leave in the garden. She never asked questions she wasn't ready to hear, and I never gave answers that might make her carry a burden too big for her shoulders. "I like it here," she said once, curled beside me on the couch. "I do too," I replied, brushing her hair with my fingers. Outside of our quiet moments, I began writing, journaling mostly, but then stories turned into posts, and posts into articles. I shared my experience anonymously at first, on the same group where I'd once asked for help. Women reached out. They told me their own stories. Some messier, some braver, all familiar. One day, the group's moderator invited me to speak in a local support circle. I said yes. I didn't wear pearls. I didn't straighten my hair. I walked in as I was, older, wiser, and still standing. I told them the truth, not the legal twists or financial betrayal, but the emotional erosion that happens when people confuse kindness with weakness, when family becomes a facade and love comes with conditions. Afterward, a woman hugged me and whispered, "You reminded me that I still get to choose myself." That night, I returned home and found Daniel sitting on the front steps of my apartment building. His eyes were sunken, his shoulders thinner, a man crumbling, not just from guilt, but from consequence. "I didn't know where else to go," he said. I said nothing, stepped aside, and let him sit beside me on the bench under the porch light. "She left," he said, "took what was left of the savings and disappeared. I don't even think she left a note. Just packed and vanished." I watched the wind move the leaves around the sidewalk. "There's debt, a lot of it," he continued. "Medical bills, credit cards. She took loans in both our names." "You knew," I said quietly. "Maybe not everything, but enough." He nodded. "I was scared," he admitted. "So was I said. "But I didn't sell you out." He didn't argue. "Emily wants to keep seeing you," he said. "I know," I replied. He looked up, hopeful. "But not through you." His eyes widened a bit, hurt blooming across his face. "She and I have our own bond," I said. "One I'll protect on my own terms." "I understand," he murmured. I stood. "Take care of yourself, Daniel." He stayed sitting as I walked back inside, and that was the last time he showed up unannounced. Weeks passed. The apartment began to feel more like home with each sunrise. I placed photos on the walls, all ones I chose. My husband and I dancing, a young Daniel smiling in a sandbox, baby Emily asleep on my chest. The past hadn't been erased, just reframed. One afternoon, as I stood watering the rosemary by the window, I heard footsteps and laughter. Emily burst through the door, arms open wide. I knelt and caught her in a hug. "You're really happy here," she said. I smiled. "I am. And do you know why?" She shook her head. "Because I remembered something." "What's that?" "That mothers are homes," I said. "But not every guest deserves to stay."